It all started on an ordinary evening. The kind you never expect will change your life forever. I had just come home after a long day, my mind still tangled in work deadlines and unfinished calls. The soft hum of the TV filled the living room, mixing with the smell of dinner still lingering in the air. That's when I noticed her standing by the doorway, my stepdaughter, Emily. There was something in her eyes that night, something that felt almost too intense for a simple glance. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing more than my imagination playing tricks on me. Emily had always been quiet since I married her mother 2 years ago. She mostly kept to herself, hidden behind books and music. But lately, I'd noticed small changes. The way she stayed around when I was in the room, how she'd laugh a little too long at my jokes, and the way her eyes sometimes seemed to study me when she thought I wasn't looking. That night, though, everything felt different. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, and my thoughts more confusing than ever. I remember trying to make small talk, asking her about school, her favorite show, anything to keep things normal. But Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she bit her lower lip, and there was something about that moment that froze me in place. Then she whispered almost too softly to hear, "I like it when you look at me like that." Her voice carried a mix of shyness and boldness, something that made my chest tighten with worry and curiosity all at once. My heart skipped, and my mind raced, trying to understand what she meant. Was it just a teenager testing boundaries? Or was it something deeper, something neither of us truly understood? I glanced toward the kitchen, hoping my wife might walk in and break the strange silence, but the house stayed painfully still. Emily's eyes didn't move from mine, and in that moment it felt like we were the only two people in the world. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head. Concern, confusion, fear of crossing lines, and a quiet dread of what might come next. I forced a gentle smile, trying to keep the mood light. "Emily, you know you can talk to me about anything, right?" I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. But she didn't answer. Instead, she took a small step closer, still biting her lip, still holding that gaze that seemed to ask questions neither of us dared to say out loud. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, each second stretching longer and longer. Just then, the sound of keys turning in the front door broke the moment, and Emily stepped back quickly, almost as if nothing had happened at all. My wife walked in, smiling and tired, asking how our evening had been. I mumbled something about homework and dinner, but my mind was still stuck in that moment by the doorway. And that's where the story truly begins. In that fragile space between what was said and what was left unsaid, where a single sentence changed everything, leaving questions that had no easy answers. That night, even after the house grew quiet, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying Emily's words, searching for some innocent meaning that could make it all feel normal again. But the memory of her voice and the look in her eyes refused to fade. I lay there in the dark, listening to the soft breathing of my wife beside me, feeling the distance between what life should feel like and what it had suddenly become. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself it had all been a misunderstanding. Maybe Emily was just being playful, trying to get attention the way teenagers sometimes do. But every time we crossed paths, I felt her gaze lingering on me, and every small exchange felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. It was like we were both dancing around something that neither of us dared to name out loud, and the more I tried to act normal, the more impossible it felt. At dinner, Emily sat quietly at the table, pushing her food around on the plate, but I could feel her eyes flicking toward me when she thought no one noticed. My wife, unaware of the strange current passing between us, chatted about her day, sharing stories from work and laughing softly. I nodded along, forcing smiles, but inside, I felt trapped between guilt and confusion. Was I imagining all of this? Or was there really something shifting in the shadows of our family? One afternoon, I got home earlier than usual. Emily was in the living room, sitting on the floor with her sketchbook open. I had never really paid attention to her drawings before, but something made me pause at the doorway. She looked up, and for a brief second there was that same look, half shy, half bold. She quickly closed the sketchbook, her cheeks turning slightly red. "What are you drawing?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just nothing," she replied, her voice quiet. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but my curiosity burned. Later that night, when the house was silent and everyone asleep, I walked past the living room and saw her sketchbook lying on the coffee table. I hesitated, torn between respecting her privacy and the need to understand what was happening. Finally, I opened it and my breath caught. There, among pages of flowers and random doodles, were sketches of me. My face, my posture, even small details like the watch I always wore. I closed the book quickly, my heart pounding. It was as if the drawings confirmed everything I'd been afraid to admit. But they also raised new questions. Was this just a harmless crush or something deeper? And what was I supposed to do about it? Part of me wanted to sit down with Emily and have an honest conversation, to help her see why this was wrong. But another part of me feared what might happen if I did. That speaking it out loud would make it real. The next morning, Emily acted like nothing had happened. She smiled, said good morning, and went back to her routine. But every time she looked at me, even for a second, it felt like a silent message passing between us. And every moment we were alone in the same room felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. That tension followed me everywhere. At work, in the car, even when I closed my eyes at night. I knew something had to be done, but I didn't know what. All I knew was that the words she had whispered still echoed in my mind, and nothing felt the same anymore. The days that followed felt like walking on a thin layer of ice, every moment threatening to crack open what we were all silently pretending not to see. At work, I'd find myself staring at the screen, lost in thought about Emily's words, the sketches, and that haunting look in her eyes. At home, the smallest things, like Emily asking if I wanted tea or passing by a little too close in the hallway, felt charged, like a question neither of us dared to ask out loud. My wife, Sarah, remained unaware of the growing tension. She was busy planning a weekend trip to visit her sister, hoping it would bring us all closer. I nodded along, trying to sound supportive, but inside, I dreaded the idea of being stuck together under one roof for an entire weekend. What if Emily took it as a chance to push things further? Or worse, what if Sarah started noticing the strange silence that fell whenever Emily and I were left alone? One night, as Sarah showered, Emily knocked gently on my study door. My chest tightened. She stepped inside, holding her sketchbook, her eyes shy but determined. "I drew something new," she said, voice almost trembling. I hesitated, but before I could answer, she opened to a fresh page. This time it was a drawing of me and her together, sitting side by side on the sofa. My heart sank. "Do you like it?" she asked softly. "It's well done, Emily," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, but inside panic twisted around my thoughts. Why was she showing this to me now? What did she expect me to say? Emily stood there for a moment longer, watching my face for a reaction, then quietly turned and left, leaving the sketchbook behind. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking of what might happen if Sarah saw those drawings. Would she blame me? Would she understand that I hadn't encouraged it? And what about Emily? What was truly going through her mind? Was this just the confused heart of a teenager desperate for attention? Or something deeper? Something broken? Meanwhile, other small cracks began to appear in our family life. Sarah started to notice my distraction, asking gently if everything was okay at work. I lied, blaming stress and deadlines, but even as I spoke, I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to grow bolder in her quiet way. She'd linger in the kitchen when I was there, offering to help with dinner, her eyes always flicking up to meet mine, searching for something I didn't want to give. Then there was the incident with the family photo album. One evening, Sarah suggested we look through old pictures together, trying to lighten the mood. Emily sat beside me, closer than usual, her shoulder brushing mine. Every photo Sarah showed seemed to make Emily's gaze grow softer, as if she were imagining a different story behind those smiling faces. At one point, she whispered so quietly I almost thought I misheard. "I wish it had always been like this." The words sent a chill through me, but before I could react, Sarah turned the page and Emily leaned back, her expression unreadable. The conflict only grew heavier, pressing on me from all sides. The fear of hurting Sarah, the confusion over Emily's feelings, and the guilt that I hadn't stopped this sooner. Each day felt like a careful balancing act, knowing that one wrong word or gesture could shatter everything. And yet, despite every effort to keep things normal, the unspoken truth sat there between us, waiting for its moment to break free. The weekend trip Sarah had planned finally arrived, and from the moment we packed the car, the air felt heavier than ever. The drive itself was quiet, each of us pretending everything was fine, though I caught Emily glancing at me in the rearview mirror more than once. Every time our eyes met, I felt that same uneasy mix of guilt and confusion tighten in my chest. Sarah, sitting beside me, kept talking about her sister's new house and how good it would be for us to spend time together. But her words felt distant, almost like background noise against the storm brewing inside my head. When we reached the small countryside house, things seemed calm at first. Sarah's sister greeted us warmly, and for a while, laughter and old stories helped me forget the tension. But Emily stayed quiet, her eyes never fully leaving me, her silence louder than any words. That night after dinner, Sarah and her sister settled on the porch to catch up, and Emily offered to help me clean up inside. The moment we were alone, the room felt smaller, the air thicker. As I stacked plates by the sink, Emily stood behind me, so close I could feel the warmth of her breath. "Why are you avoiding me?" she asked in a voice that was both soft and sharp. My hands froze. I tried to steady my voice. "Emily, this isn't right. You know that." But she stepped closer, her words quick, almost desperate. "But you look at me too. I see it. Don't pretend you don't." My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear her. For a second I thought Sarah might walk in and see us like this, and the thought terrified me more than anything. Before I could answer, Emily reached out, her hand brushing my arm. The contact felt like a spark, dangerous and wrong, and I pulled away so quickly that a glass slipped from the counter and shattered on the floor. The crash echoed through the house, breaking the moment but not the tension. Sarah's voice called from outside, asking if everything was okay. Emily just stood there, wide-eyed, lips parted, as if she didn't know what to do next. "Just a glass," I shouted back, forcing my voice to sound calm. That night I barely slept, listening to every creak of the old house, every rustle of wind outside. My mind kept replaying Emily's words, the look in her eyes, the same look that had haunted me since that first night. I wondered what she truly wanted, what had driven her to this point. And more than anything, I wondered what I was supposed to do now. Trapped between protecting my family and facing something none of us wanted to admit. The next day, Sarah suggested a walk through the nearby woods, hoping to bring us all closer. We followed a narrow path, sunlight flickering through the trees. Emily walked just behind me, so quiet I could almost feel her thoughts pressing into my back. Suddenly, the path forked and Sarah, distracted by a call from her sister, stepped away for a moment, leaving Emily and me alone again. The forest felt too still, the silence too deep. Emily moved closer, her voice low. "Why won't you just say it? You feel it too, don't you?" My pulse raced, the moment stretching painfully long, the weight of unspoken words pressing on both of us. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, Sarah's voice called from up ahead, breaking the silence and pulling us back from the edge. Yet even as we caught up with her, I knew the question still hung there between us, waiting, and that whatever came next would change everything forever. As we caught up with Sarah on the trail, I tried to steady my breathing, forcing my mind back to safer thoughts. But Emily's words kept echoing in my head, louder than the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. I could feel her watching me, waiting to see if I'd say something, but I stayed silent, afraid any reply would only pull us deeper into something neither of us should want. The sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the path, making everything feel more isolated. Sarah, cheerful and unaware, suggested we take a shortcut back. Emily walked a step behind me, and I kept my gaze forward, pretending not to notice the tension that had thickened the air. My thoughts raced through what had happened, her drawings, the whispered words, the look that felt too close to longing. I kept telling myself it couldn't get worse, but I was wrong. As we neared a bend in the trail, Sarah's phone rang again. She stepped aside to answer it, her voice fading into the distance. Emily moved closer, and before I could react, she slipped something small into my hand. Surprised, I looked down to see a folded piece of paper, her handwriting barely visible through the fold. I opened it with shaking fingers, my heart sinking as I read the words. "I've told someone." Panic surged through me, so strong it nearly made my knees buckle. I turned to her, my voice low and urgent. "What did you do, Emily?" She wouldn't meet my eyes, her face pale, lips trembling. "I had to. You wouldn't say anything, so I had to." My mind spun, trying to make sense of her words. Who had she told? And what exactly had she told them? Before I could ask more, Sarah returned, smiling, completely unaware of the storm swirling around us. I forced a smile back, my hands tightening around the paper until it nearly tore. The rest of the walk back felt endless. Every step my chest tightened with fear of what Emily might have done, what damage her confession could cause. When we got back to the house, I waited for a moment alone and pulled Emily aside, my voice barely controlled. "Who did you tell? And what did you say?" Emily's eyes filled with tears and her voice cracked. "I only told my friend that I thought you felt something too. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." The words crashed into me like cold water. Even if it was only her friend, word could spread. What if it reached Sarah? What if people misunderstood everything, turning whispers into accusations? The stakes had shifted, and the fear of destroying our family had never felt so real. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, Emily whispered something that chilled me to the bone. "She told me to prove it, to get you to say it. That's why I pushed you earlier." The truth of it struck hard. This wasn't just Emily's feelings anymore. Now someone else knew, someone outside our family. And that meant the secret I tried so hard to keep buried was already halfway exposed. I stood there, caught between anger, fear, and guilt, watching Emily's tear-streaked face. Sarah's voice called us for dinner from inside the house, breaking the moment yet again. But this time the weight felt heavier than ever. Because now the danger wasn't only what Emily felt. It was what she'd shared. What could spread beyond our control? And what could destroy us all before I even had a chance to stop it? That night, the tension finally reached a point where silence felt more dangerous than speaking. After dinner, when Sarah stepped outside to take another call, I found Emily alone in the living room, sitting with her head lowered, shoulders shaking as if she were trying not to cry. My chest felt heavy, knowing we couldn't keep circling around what had happened, not with what she'd already shared outside these walls. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, my voice quiet but firm. She looked up, her eyes red, fear and regret mixed in her gaze. "I never wanted this to go so far," she whispered, voice barely holding together. I thought maybe if you admitted you cared it would feel less confusing. But it's worse now, isn't it?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Emily. It is. I care about you, your family, and that will never change. But this can't keep happening. It's hurting everyone, and it could destroy us all." My words shook as they came out, but I meant everyone. She lowered her gaze, tears slipping down her face. Then, almost as if the words had been building up for days, she blurted, "I lied to my friend. I said you felt something more because I wanted her to believe me. But I know it isn't true." The confession hit like a wave, relief mixing with a deeper sadness. Part of me had feared she might say I'd done something wrong, but instead she admitted the truth, that it had all come from her side, driven by her confusion and loneliness. Just then Sarah came back inside, noticing the tension. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between us. Emily stood up, wiping her face. "I need to tell you something, Mom," she said, her voice trembling but clear. My heart stopped, bracing for the worst. But Emily surprised me. I've been feeling confused. And I thought he might feel the same. But he doesn't. And it was wrong of me to think that. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, then settled on me, searching for answers. Before I could speak, Emily added, "He never did anything wrong, Mom. It was all in my head." "I'm sorry." Her words hung heavy in the room, raw and painfully honest. Sarah moved closer to Emily, pulling her into a hug. I watched silently, relief slowly flooding in but mixed with a deep ache for how close we'd come to disaster. But just as I thought things were finally calming down, Emily's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, her face draining of color as she read a message. I stepped closer and she showed me the screen. It was from her friend. "I told someone else. It's too late now." My stomach dropped. Even though Emily had confessed and we tried to fix it, the secret had already slipped beyond our control. The damage was already spreading, and none of us knew how far it would go. Emily whispered, "I thought telling the truth would fix everything." I put a hand on her shoulder, voice low. "Sometimes it does, but sometimes it comes too late." And in that moment I realized the truth might save us at home, but outside rumors had already begun to grow into something we couldn't stop. A final twist none of us had seen coming, turning relief back into fear, leaving us standing on the edge of consequences we could no longer predict. The next few days felt like holding our breath, waiting for a storm we could already hear in the distance. Emily barely spoke, her face pale with guilt and fear of what might come from the words she'd shared too freely. Sarah tried to keep us together, though I could see questions still flickering behind her eyes, questions she was too afraid to ask out loud. At night, the silence in the house felt heavier than ever, each of us lying awake, wondering who knew what and what story was now being told outside our walls. Then it happened. Sarah's phone rang late in the evening. I watched her face change as she listened, her eyes growing wide with disbelief, then narrowing with worry. After she hung up, she looked at me, her voice shaking. "It's Emily's school. They heard a rumor. They're asking questions." My heart sank, realizing that no matter how much Emily had confessed at home, the story had already taken on a life of its own outside. The next morning, we all sat together in the living room, the three of us finally forced to talk about everything openly. Emily's voice trembled as she explained exactly what she'd told her friend, that she thought I looked at her in a certain way, that maybe I cared more than a stepfather should. She admitted she had been confused and lonely, wanting to feel special, and that she now understood it had been a mistake. Sarah listened quietly, tears in her eyes, caught between relief that nothing truly happened and pain for what her daughter had gone through. I spoke next, my words slow but honest. "Emily, I do care about you, but only as family. That's all it ever could be. And I should have seen sooner how hurt and lonely you felt." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face, whispering how sorry she was for letting it get so far. Sarah took her hand, gently reminding her that love sometimes shows up in confusing ways, especially when someone feels lost. In the days that followed, Sarah stood by us when the school counselor called, explaining calmly that nothing had happened beyond misunderstanding and loneliness. The counselor listened, and though questions remained, the rumors eventually faded when nothing more came forward. Slowly, life returned to something closer to normal, though not quite the same. Emily apologized to her friend, too, realizing the damage careless words could do, and they drifted apart after that. Looking back, I realized the heart of it all wasn't about forbidden feelings, but about loneliness, attention, and the dangerous space between what's felt and what's spoken. Emily learned how powerful words could become once shared, and I learned how easily silence can be mistaken for acceptance. Sarah too understood that even in a loving family, it's possible for someone to feel unseen. In the end, what could have broken us instead taught us something none of us would forget. We became more careful with words, more open with feelings, and more willing to ask the questions we'd once avoided. Emily grew quieter but also stronger, finally seeing herself not through imagined approval but her own worth. The rumor faded into the background, a lesson carved deep in our story. And though the memory of that day in the woods and those whispered words would always stay with us, they became a reminder of what can happen when truth is delayed, and why it matters to speak before silence turns into something far heavier than it was ever meant to be.